The buzz around the start of the season is getting louder. And if you've been paying attention to what's coming out of Toronto, you already know things are getting intense before the first pitch is even thrown. There's a mix of excitement, curiosity, and, let's be honest, a little bit of concern building around this team, especially when you look at what's happening with the pitching staff. Spring training was supposed to give clarity, but instead, it's raising even more questions about how this rotation is actually going to look when opening day finally arrives. One of the biggest talking points right now revolves around Trey Savage, and the situation is far from simple. For weeks, there were whispers about the way the team was handling his workload. Everything felt very controlled, almost too controlled, like there was something more going on behind the scenes. And now it all makes sense. Savage is set to begin the season on the injured list due to a shoulder impingement, something he apparently brought with him when he arrived at camp. That slow build-up we saw suddenly clicks into place. And while it's a relief to hear that he's feeling better, the reality is he just didn't have enough time to be fully ready. What makes this even more interesting is how the organization approached it. Instead of rushing him back or trying to squeeze him into the early part of the schedule, they took a step back. They prioritized the long-term picture, and honestly, that might be the smartest move they could have made. In a sport where pitching injuries can spiral out of control quickly, being cautious isn't a weakness, it's a necessity. Even though fans want to see their best arms on the mound right away, holding Savage back now could pay off in a big way later in the season. But here's where things start to get a little uneasy. Savage isn't the only name on that list. When you add in Shane Bieber and Jose Berrios, suddenly you're looking at 3 starting pitchers who won't be available when the season kicks off. That completely reshapes the conversation around this rotation. Not long ago, there was a sense of depth, a feeling that this team had options. Now, that cushion is gone, and the margin for error is getting thinner by the day. And this is where the spotlight starts to shift onto the guys who are actually going to take the mound. Kevin Gausman immediately stands out as the anchor of this group. He's the one name that brings a sense of stability, the guy you can point to and say, this is what we can count on. There's confidence in what he brings, not just because of his track record, but because there aren't many question marks surrounding his performance. If anything, the only concerns tied to him go beyond this season, not what he's capable of doing right now. After that, though, things get a lot more complicated. Dylan Cease is a name that brings both excitement and hesitation at the same time. There's no denying the talent, but when you look closer, you start to see the inconsistencies that could become an issue. Command has been a talking point, and when you're dealing with a pitcher who can allow the ball to get elevated, that always brings a level of risk. It's the kind of situation where the upside is huge, but so is the unpredictability. Then you look at the rest of the rotation, and the uncertainty only grows. Max Scherzer is one of the most fascinating cases here. There's experience, there's pedigree, and there's no question about what he's accomplished in his career. But at this stage, it's all about whether he can still deliver consistently. The flashes are there, especially in spring training, where he's shown signs that he can still compete at a high level. The velocity looks good, the presence on the mound is still intimidating, but the real test is whether that can hold up over time. Cody Poteet is another name that suddenly carries more weight than expected. Not long ago, he might have been viewed as a depth option, someone who could step in when needed. Now, he's being looked at as a key piece, especially in the early part of the season. That's a big shift in responsibility, and it changes the way you evaluate what he brings to the table. It's no longer about potential in a limited role. It's about whether he can handle meaningful innings when the team really needs it. And then there's Eric Lauer, who finds himself in a similar situation. He's not necessarily a player that jumps off the page, but he doesn't have to be. What matters is whether he can give the team stability, whether he can go out there and keep things under control long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Because that's really what this all comes down to. It's about buying time. It's about surviving this early stretch without letting things slip too far. The tricky part is that pitching depth can disappear fast, especially when injuries start to stack up. Right now, the conversation isn't just about who's missing, it's about what happens if another piece falls. Because at that point, you're not just adjusting, you're scrambling. The options become thinner, the pressure increases, and suddenly every decision carries a lot more weight than it should this early in the season. Still, there's another way to look at all of this. None of these injuries, at least based on what we know, are season-ending. That's a huge factor. It means this isn't about replacing these players for the long haul. It's about managing the situation until they're ready to come back. And if the team can hold things together, if the current rotation can perform just well enough, there's a path where this all stabilizes once those arms return. That's where the balance comes in. On one side, you have legitimate concerns about depth, consistency, and durability. On the other, you have a roster that still has talent, still has potential, and still has time to figure things out. It's not a perfect situation, not even close, but it's also not a disaster. It's somewhere in between, and how this team navigates that space is going to define the early part of their season in a big way. Because right now, every inning matters a little bit more. Every start carries a little extra pressure. And every performance from this rotation is going to be under the microscope as the team tries to answer one simple question that doesn't feel so simple anymore. Can this group hold it together long enough to keep everything on track? As the conversation keeps unfolding, the focus naturally shifts from just who is available to a deeper question that not many people were asking a few weeks ago. How reliable is this rotation? Really? Because it's one thing to list names and talk about potential, but it's another to project performance over the course of a full season, especially when so many variables are already in play before opening day even arrives. And when you start breaking it down piece by piece, you begin to see why there's a growing sense of tension surrounding this group. Max Scherzer, on the other hand, almost feels like a wild card in the best and worst ways possible. There's something reassuring about having a veteran with that kind of experience, someone who has seen everything this game can throw at him. But at the same time, there's no ignoring the reality of where he is in his career. The flashes in spring training have been encouraging, and you can see glimpses of that dominant version still within him, but the big question is durability. Can he handle the workload? Can he go out there every fifth day without breaking down? Because if the answer is yes, even for a short stretch, he becomes incredibly valuable for this team. What's fascinating is how quickly roles have changed for some of the other pitchers. Cody Poteet is a perfect example of that shift. Not long ago, he was more of a depth option, someone you could plug in without expecting too much. Now, he's being looked at as a key contributor, especially early in the season. That's a completely different level of responsibility, and it changes the way you evaluate his performance. It's not just about whether he can pitch, it's about whether he can handle pressure situations when the team doesn't have many alternatives. Eric Lauer falls into a similar category, but with a slightly different expectation. He doesn't need to be spectacular, he just needs to be steady. The challenge, though, is that consistency hasn't always been his strongest trait. There are moments where he looks locked in, where everything is working exactly the way it should. And then there are stretches where things unravel quickly. For this team, the key is finding a way to minimize those swings and get enough solid outings to bridge the gap until the injured pitchers return. And that brings everything back to the timeline of those injuries, which might be the most important factor in all of this. Trey Savage seems to be the closest to returning, and that's a huge positive. The fact that he's still throwing, still building up, suggests that his absence might not stretch too far into the season. If he can come back relatively soon and perform at the level the team expects, it could stabilize the rotation in a significant way. Jose Barrios, however, introduces a different kind of concern. It's not just about when he comes back, it's about how effective he'll be once he does. Injuries that linger, especially for pitchers, can become a recurring issue if they're not fully resolved. And when you hear about something that could potentially worsen with continued workload, that's when the alarm bells start to ring a little louder. It's the kind of situation where even if he returns, there's still uncertainty surrounding what version of him the team will actually get. Shane Bieber might be the biggest question mark of them all, and that's saying something considering everything else going on. Coming off a major procedure and still working his way back, there's no clear timeline, no definitive answer on when he'll be ready to contribute. And for a team that's already dealing with multiple absences, That lack of clarity makes planning even more difficult. You can't rely on something that doesn't have a set return date, and that forces the team to lean even more heavily on the options they currently have. All of this creates a situation where the margin for error becomes incredibly small. It's not just about talent anymore. It's about execution, health, and timing all coming together at the right moment. One more setback, one more unexpected dip in performance, and suddenly the entire structure starts to feel unstable. That's the reality of pitching depth in baseball. It can look solid one day and completely fragile the next. At the same time, there's still a sense that this team has enough pieces to navigate through the chaos, at least in the short term. The belief in certain players hasn't disappeared. It's just being tested earlier than expected. And sometimes, that's where teams reveal what they're really made of. When everything is going according to plan, it's easy to feel confident. But when things start to shift, when challenges show up before the season even begins, that's when you find out who can actually step up and carry the load. Because make no mistake, that's what this early stretch is going to demand. It's going to require adjustments, resilience, and probably a few unexpected performances along the way. And as this situation continues to evolve, the conversation isn't going to slow down anytime soon, especially with more roster decisions looming and even more pressure building around what this pitching staff can realistically become once the games start to count. But before we move forward, don't forget to join our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest news about the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the news, so drop a comment below. A wave of uncertainty is quietly building around the Los Angeles Dodgers, as whispers from within Major League Baseball circles suggest a stunning potential breakup involving some of the game's biggest names. While nothing has been confirmed, insiders hint that four cornerstone figures, Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki, and Freddie Freeman, could be heading toward the exit. The speculation has sent shockwaves through the baseball world, not only because of the talent involved, but also due to the sheer improbability of such a scenario. Ohtani, widely regarded as a once-in-a-generation player, was expected to be a long-term pillar of the franchise. Yamamoto and Sasaki represent the new wave of dominant pitching from Japan, both seen as essential to the Dodgers' sustained competitiveness. Freeman, meanwhile, embodies leadership and consistency, a veteran presence anchoring the lineup. Sources close to the situation describe a complex mix of financial recalibration, clubhouse dynamics, and long-term strategic planning. Some suggest the organization may be considering a dramatic reset despite its star-studded roster, while others believe external market pressures could be influencing internal decisions. Rival teams are reportedly monitoring the situation closely, ready to act should any opportunity arise. Within the clubhouse, the mood is said to be focused but uncertain. Players and staff have largely avoided public comment, fueling further intrigue. Around the league, executives are divided. Some dismiss the rumors as off-season noise, while others caution that where there is smoke, there may be fire. That's all for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date with exclusive news about the Los Angeles Dodgers, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We always appreciate your comments and feedback. See you in the next video.